I had just been writing independently on my own, not for anyone else's view, for the past decade or so. And my husband's like, you need to put this out into the world and see what the response is. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, if there's any response, I don't know that these stories are going to resonate. They're sad. Who wants to hear about this? It turns out 1,000 people. Welcome to Created Creative. I'm Dawn.
And I'm Ruth. How has your week been?
It's been so much figuring because this is the break between semesters. And I said this, if you're following us live on Instagram, you should. Designing the way our week is going to flow from now till June. It's not a forever amount of time, but it's something you want to pay attention to and figure out and not just let happen.
Yeah.
So it's been a jigsaw puzzle of what's available on which days and not doing too much on any particular day and having some days free.
And we should remind listeners the Created Creative Challenge just started.
Yes.
So if they haven't signed up yet, they could still sign up and join in the fun, join in the joy.
Yeah. Also, we're going to talk about you using Word for graphics. So if you go to the website, you can download 100 ideas.
Yes.
That's on a PDF that came from a Word document.
I should have got back to Canva because I was wrestling with it so much too, but I wanted them on that piece of paper because I was making it into the letter that was going into the consecrates,
Which
as
could
well,
also
so.
be on Canva.
Yeah, you're right.
It doesn't
you're
use
right.
your, I know,
You're
it's
right.
a different brain space. When you write
Yeah.
letters, you go to Word. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was born in 1970, but yeah, people have no idea how much work went into that PDF.
Oh, everyone download it.
Download the PDF immediately.
Yeah. It's so fun
Yeah.
to see everyone using the hashtag Created Creative Challenge.
Yes, it's been very fun so far. So please join in if you haven't.
How was your week?
Yeah, here I'm trying to think if there's any news. Jesse had his one-act performance, and that went really well. And then he had another one-act performance, and they were taking the winner from last night went to state, and their team wasn't the winner, but they did a very good job.
But they got to go to state.
Yep. So it was a very nice time. But otherwise, just, we're in the middle of box packing right now. So that's why I don't have much else going on. Oh, and you saw the article in the newspaper?
Famous.
Yes, in the Detroit Lakes Tribune.
It's really a good article.
Yeah, it was good. I've had enough articles written over time that I always brace myself.
For what they put.
Yeah,
you
but
can't control it.
This one was good. And then, of course, there was a shout out to Created Creative Podcast on it.
So welcome to all of our new listeners from
Exactly.
Detroit Lakes and the surrounding area.
Yes. So that was very exciting. And I'm excited about our guest for today.
And too, she was so thoughtful.
Yeah, very smart. And my roomie from Turks and Caicos, Christine, and she's just a very interesting person. And I'm really glad that the two of you met each other face to face.
I am too. She also really spends all her time thinking about life or death.
Literally
in ways other people don't. So it's so fascinating to see where she's landed now, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve.
I think our listeners are really going to enjoy this interview with Christine Davies.
Hi, Dawn. Hi.
Christine and I were just reminiscing a little bit because we were both in Turks and Caicos.
So I just saw, Tell us why everyone should sign up for next year's mystery location. Well, this was my second time on a consecrate trip. I loved it so much the first time. So, of course, I signed up to go back the second time. And it is just amazing to be with a group of female clergy, just people who get it. And this time it was phenomenal because it was on a beach and felt very much like a retreat. And I remember turning to someone and saying, how can you not feel close to God while watching the waves? And we just had some great time together, some fantastic yoga on the beach. We had luxurious meals. We had kind of group spiritual direction time. So I was telling my spiritual director this morning, I don't know if I've been that relaxed in about 10 years.
Wow.
There's the sound bite.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree. Like, there was something about this one in particular that was very restful. And I actually felt ready to go back to work again. And I hardly ever can say that I feel rested. And it was so fun, the whole thing. And Christine, of course, having you there was delightful.
Yeah, so I can't decide what I'm signing up for. I'm going to either do the next consecrate or the Amsterdam trip. I don't know that I could swing both. So I have to come up with either or, and they are both so tempting and wonderful. So
Yeah.
either way, we will get to see
Yeah.
each other in person
Yes.
in 2026.
Mhm.
Yay. We'll see. I may have to crash, in New Zealand just to say hi to
Oh,
Ruth at some point.
yay. Oh, good. I like that idea
Where
too.
are you? How far
I'm
is
in New
that,
Jersey,
Christine?
so
Oh,
I
okay.
am not realistically going to New Zealand anytime
Well,
soon. But I used to live in New York City. So that's why I was telling Ruth when we were in Turks and Caicos, I was like, how did our paths never connect? I hung out with too many Presbyterians.
I guess we'll just have to meet in some other world destination instead.
So, Christine, could you take a few moments to introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Christine Davies. I am a Presbyterian minister, and I run the chaplaincy services department at a large level 1 trauma center in New Jersey, where I'm also a CPE supervisor. And I imagine for your listeners that don't know what that is, we can get into it a little bit. On the side, I have a spiritual direction practice where I meet with individuals. And I'm the mom to 2 boys, ages 8 and 10. And when I'm not doing any of those things or all of those things at once, I write, mostly on Substack these days. I publish articles about what it's like to journey alongside someone, writing about grief and empathy, self-care and spirituality. And I weave in stories from my hospital work, from didactics that I might teach students, and various spiritual practices for people to try on.
And I saw that you just hit 1,000 followers on your Substack. Is that right?
Yes.
Seth Godin says you just need 1,000 followers and you can do anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes. I was surprised at how touched I was by that milestone. And I don't know how much your listeners may know about Substack, but to me, it's a little different to have, followers or subscribers on there than it would be some of the other social media platforms. Like, I probably have that on Facebook and LinkedIn, but what makes it unique on Substack is these are people that have entered their email into Substack and said, we want to hear from you when you publish your articles. We want them coming into my inbox. And so that just felt really great. And I don't know them all. I might know like 4 that are related to me, or sometimes it's my CPE students or colleagues of mine. But for the most part, you can discover all sorts of writers on there. And then it has been such a generative community of people really encouraging one another. And the ways in which our work can sometimes intersect is really neat.
You were the first person who I think I ever followed on Substack, and I really didn't know much about it before.
That should go on my bio, that I am the first Ruth ever followed.
Yes, yes. And I didn't know much about it at all before I was talking to you about it. So, had you heard about it for a while before you decided to be on Substack? What made you feel like this was the move for you?
Yeah, so I had not heard about it until my husband said, you need to do this. He's a little more tech savvy than I. I blogged for years when that was popular, and I had just been writing independently on my own, not for anyone else's view, for the past decade or so. Snippets of what I thought might maybe be a manuscript one day, but just writing for my own purposes. And my husband's like, you need to put this out into the world and see what the response is. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, if there's any response, I don't know that these stories are going to resonate. They're sad. Who wants to hear about this? Well, it turns out 1,000 people.
We know exactly how many people want to hear about this.
So that was really nice. But the other neat thing about it is getting to meet other people. So people can comment, people can email me. I've had Zoom meetups with individuals. I've had people come up to me at conferences and say, oh, you're Christine Davies. My supervisor gave me an article of yours to read after supervision one day. And so just knowing that it may be helping people out there has been really the greatest gift from doing it. And then just the practice of writing and really forming that discipline and thinking about, okay, how can I make this, into an article, or how might this resonate with someone?
And do you try to put one out once a week or every couple weeks?
Yeah, so I started once a week, and I was like, oh, that's a lot of work, because my posts are pretty long form. I'm writing about 1,500 to 3,000 words each time. And, I have some other jobs and things like that. So I was doing once a week for a while. Now I'm aiming for every 2 weeks, and always have a couple of different things that I'm writing at any given time. I have like about 5 different posts I'm working on right now, and then seeing, okay, what makes sense to come up now.
And do you know offhand which of your posts has gotten the most traffic?
It's always interesting to me. And the other thing that's interesting too is sometimes there's unsubscribes afterward. Like, wow. So I can kind of wonder, like, oh, a lot of people didn't like this one because they're like, nope, take me off the list. I wrote one on exorcisms. I thought for sure that was going to be the one that was going to put everyone over the top. Nope, it was self-care. People didn't want to hear about self-care. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But the two most popular ones I had, one was called Sacred Tears. So it's all about crying and how it can be holy and vulnerable and actually powerful, and how to be with someone else as they're crying, what to say, what not to say, what to do. And then the other one that was very popular was The Dark Night of the Soul. And, growing up in the church and being a spiritual director and being clergy, we've known what that is for quite some time. But I think why it resonated with people is because they had that experience, but they didn't know that there was a name for it. So I think it really normalized what people were going through. And for that one in particular, I had a number of people, you can comment on there and people can see that publicly, but I had a number of people email me and say, oh my goodness, this is perfect. This is what I'm going through right now, or this is what my friend is going through, and I've sent them this article. So I think there's something about being able to name that and claim it in order to really tame it and understand it.
Yeah.
Anything you can name, it is night and day. It's so empowering.
And you also, sort of in conjunction with the Substack, you sort of did an experiment last year of getting on podcasts, and then you ended up being on a lot of podcasts last year.
I did, yeah. Where someone must have told me, or I read somewhere like, oh, if you're wanting to, find an audience, that's what you should do. You should go on podcasts. I thought, okay, well, I'll try to go on a podcast. That'll be my goal kind of for the year.
A podcast.
And I went on 50 something and I didn't say no to anyone. I was pitching myself all over. Now I only do the ones that ask or people that I like and know very well. Yours is actually the first podcast that I've been a guest on that I've actually listened to on my own accord for the past year that you've had it. So this feels very special. Some of the other podcasts I've listened to since, and certainly to prepare for it, but it wasn't already on my feed. So it's funny, I went into it not knowing what to expect, and it really helped me to have conversations with people who really weren't as familiar with my work and wanting to know more about it. And so I was listening carefully to what are the questions that they are asking me? What are the themes that are coming up? And I went on a couple of Christian podcasts, but by and large, the majority of them were not. So they were maybe healthcare, and I was talking about what chaplains do. Some of them were more just general podcasts, and I was talking about spirituality or what a spiritual director does. Some other ones really wanted me to focus on grief and loss, and so I talked about that and how the spiritual element can be woven into that. So, and that was the other thing. I would give people a number of different topics and see what they picked. And so it was really neat, and I got to meet a lot of people, which was fun as well. And maybe some of those people wound up subscribing. That I don't know necessarily, but it was a way to put myself out there, and that is not usually how I approach the world.
So 50 podcasts equals approximately 1,000 subscribers. Maybe.
Well, I think that's great. And it's really brave to put yourself out there and then to see what people are interested in talking about the most with you. Did grief seem to be the one that you talked about the most?
I think so. A lot of people wanted to hear about grief. A lot of people wanted to know what to do when their friends were grieving. That was a big one. And so I had already kind of been kicking around a topic for a post, but I wrote one specifically on religious platitudes and the use of them called God Doesn't Need Another Angel.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's powerful for someone, who's clergy to be able to say these things, especially when there is so much religious toxicity out there that many of us are swimming in, and the ways in which it's become internalized. And we say things without recognizing the spiritual harm that can be done. And that's a lot of what I do as a CPE educator. And so I felt sometimes on the podcast, I felt like I was just diving into the didactics or the mini lectures that I would normally give my students about, okay, this is how you be with someone when, they are going through the unbearable. And so that's also kind of what helped prompt me to do some of the podcasts, really looking at it as not so much, promoting myself because I'm not so great at that, but I can educate people about how to support others better, how not to use these religious platitudes. I can tell them what a chaplain is. I can tell them what a spiritual director is. One of my favorite moments was I was on a healthcare podcast, and I can't remember the two hosts. They were either nurse practitioners or APNs. I don't think they're MTs. One of them said to me in the beginning, he's like, yeah, I don't know why we're having you on here. Okay, we're recording.
Record.
And he's like, I don't believe in chaplains. So I was like, okay. By the end, he's like, yes, I now see how important chaplaincy is, and I'm going to talk to my hospital and make sure we have these services. So that felt like a win for the field.
That is huge.
So you're living with everybody's self-introspection rejection and buried grief all the time. How does one be in that?
I do think it has to be a calling, and it won't surprise anyone to know that I'm an Enneagram 2. So I
You're
grew
helping.
up always helping people. But what I have found, and I write some about this too, is I have to be grounded and rooted in my own either spiritual practice or sense of self or identity, or however one is defining that, to be a CPE supervisor. And CPE stands for Clinical Pastoral Education. And many of your clergy listeners will be rolling their eyes at this, perhaps recalling horror stories of their own CPE experiences. And for those that have never heard of it, it is essentially an intensive internship that many clergy do while in seminary or afterwards, where they're learning about themselves and learning how to provide even more effective spiritual care to other people. And especially in my setting in a hospital, it is usually around life and death issues all of the time. It is a psychodynamic education model. So it's not just about, I'm going to go see this patient and pray for them. It's, what did this patient bring up in me? What have I not processed? Why did I choose to say this? And how did that get in the way of me connecting with the patient? So it's a lot. It's a lot for the students that go through it. It's a lot to train to become a CPE supervisor. But I have learned over the years of my doing this, self-care is such a priority. And that's a lot of why I write about it, because I was so bad at it for so long, and really recognizing that it can take on many different forms. And for me, writing is a form of self-care. Even speaking and doing podcasts can also be that, because it is helping me to branch out and to do different things. And right now, it is very life-giving for me.
That's
And
awesome.
do you have a community of like CPE supervisor people that help
Yes.
ground you?
Oh my goodness, I have so many communities. I'm very fortunate. I have 2 CPE supervisor peer groups. I have a spiritual direction supervisory peer group. I have a therapist. I have my own spiritual director.
Yes.
So I do a lot of processing with a lot of people. I like to joke, I have a lot of people on my payroll. It's actually a requirement to be a CPE supervisor. Just the other day, I had my peer review, which we have to do every 3 years. So we're having to do all of this writing and this introspection, but then we are required to meet with people on an ongoing basis.
And it's quite an involved process to become a CPE supervisor, right?
It is. And until this past December 31st, I was in charge of that process for ACPE. So that's the other reason I was able to relax so much at the beach in Turks and Caicos, because I no longer have that title, and my email inbox was only half as full as it would have been when I returned. So it is long and involved. We did revise the process a couple of years ago in 2018. And so I like to think that the process that we have now is gentler and easier. People going through it, the certified educator candidates may have a difference of opinion on that, but it is meant to be relational. And it's the type of thing someone really has to want to do it. And if any of your listeners are interested in it, those are conversations I still have with people all of the time, even in my non-official role now.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you want it to be a little rigorous.
Yes.
It's like you want your brain surgeon to do a ridiculously long residency.
That is true. And it is the type of thing where if you are going to be sitting with CPE students who are vulnerable and are witnessing the suffering on a daily basis, making sense of their own stories, especially when it comes to suffering, you really have to do a lot of work to be able to get to the place to guide people through that.
Yeah, I think back to CPE experience. I did the regular one in a hospital, and then I did an extended unit when I was in my first year as a pastor too. And I remember how in depth it got into your own life and your own story, and making you think about why you respond the way that you do. But there's things I learned, like I remember there was a priest who I kind of had to follow around during my first unit. And there was the supervisor, and then there was a mentor or something. I don't know what that's called, but he was
Clinical preceptor.
Preceptor,
Yep.
yeah. He was so good with the patients, and some of the things he would say are still things I use today, because he was very good. And so I want to talk more about the creativity and the writing. But first, before I do that, you also are a beekeeper as well. You are a woman with many talents, Christine.
Lots of hobbies. None of them pay
Yes.
the bills, but yes.
How long have you been keeping bees?
So my husband and I did live in New York City for the longest time. And then when my second son was about to be born, we thought, oh, we needed more space. And we wound up in New Jersey with 34 acres. So to go from a tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Queens to the country where we didn't own cars right away. We owned a tractor because it came with the house, but we didn't own cars for about a decade. So that was a culture shock. But part of it was the really intentional self-care, wanting to be in a place that felt like a retreat. And actually where I'm sitting right now is an outbuilding where this is my spiritual direction office, but also made it to be almost like a retreat house. So when either of you come to visit me, you can stay here. And what I would love to do at some point, in addition to giving people like on sabbatical spiritual direction while they're staying here, is almost a apitherapy type experience of working with the bees. Right now I'm in between bees because the bear got them, but we'll have more soon.
Oh, no.
That happens. We have this bear that likes to come around and steal them away from me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and my sons are really trying to talk me into goats in the spring, so that those might be an addition. And then we have chickens and, lots of other wild animals rolling around.
Oh, my goodness.
We're studying, this is an accidental synchronicity, but these bees are kept.
I got the ants, the bee
Do you know
dance.
this? Yeah. Oh my gosh. This was just like at the library, but they are kept bees. A person is raising these bees. Yeah.
For Mystery Reader Day, which is in some elementary schools, you can sign up to be the mystery reader so the parents can come in and read a book to the kids. I have done it in my full-on bee suit, read books on bees, taught the kids how to do a waggle dance.
You're so fun.
Isn't she fun?
Hopefully my
amazing.
kids will still think that when they're older and they hear this story, but they did like it and appreciate it in that moment.
You win.
Wow.
That's so great. I love it.
That is.
The other
Wow.
book that I've done for Mystery Reader when not doing the bee one is The Rabbit Listened. I don't know if you all know that book. I've also read it to my CPE students. It's a children's book, but it talks about how to be with people and how to listen.
I'm writing that down. That sounds. I have not read that book, but
It's a great children's sermon too, if you need that.
Yeah.
Keep it in your backpack.
Seriously, yeah.
But you had a beekeeper on and he was fantastic. I've been doing this for years and I still learned things from him.
He was very thorough.
Well, and I wrote a post about the spirituality of beekeeping and sent it to him. So we were able to connect around that.
Oh, yay. Isn't that wonderful?
He invited us over as well. So I guess the beekeeping community is just very welcoming.
I know. I think that's got to be part of our tour, Dawn. So visit
Where
the-
was he?
visit
I
on the
forget.
beach.
Where was he?
He is in
He's in-
Lynchburg, Kansas, and they have this whole Swedish festival.
Oh, well, that's another reason.
So
to
we were going
go.
to kind of like go during the festival.
Yeah, you're going to have to take creative on the road
I
and do like
know.
some
Would that
live
be
shows.
fun? Yeah, I'm totally game for the tour.
Okay.
So, Christine, I wanted to ask you, what has been one of your most enjoyable creative experiences?
My husband and I last summer, we were in Switzerland and we were going all around the country via train and ultimately ending up in the Alps and doing some hiking. But it was just dedicated time where I was with other people, but they were quiet. I had, the silence and the solitude, a gorgeous view, out the window of all the mountains. And so I would occasionally just watch it go by. But I wound up kind of writing. And even afterwards, my husband's like, you wrote a post about crying while on vacation? It just kind of came to me. And there are moments I have found, in the writing process where it just flows and it seems so easy. And those are fantastic. And then there are moments where I feel like I am pulling teeth and staring at a blank screen and wondering, oh my goodness, even the post I'm working on right now, I cannot tell you how many times I've had to edit it and move things around and I think it's going to work now, but who knows? And so that was one where just everything was flowing beautifully as we were training through the Swiss countryside. So that was a cool experience.
That sounds amazing. I can picture it. It sounds beautiful. And who are some of your favorite creators?
So I would say a lot of the people that I have found on Substack have been so fun to read. And so it's not just about like me putting my work out, but it's about reading other people's work. And I recommend some of them on my Substack. I won't name any because I will forget someone. I would also say my children, they are creative in ways that I am not, but they do inspire me. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old. They made up some Pokemon version of a game. They made up all their own cards of all these different characters and they play it for hours, which is great for me. So I can get a little writing done. Or the other day, my 10-year-old started working on a story, which is kind of funny because it reminds me of Substack. He did it in Google Docs and he shared it with his friends so his friends can see it, but they can't edit it. And it's called Cereal Jerry. And it's about a bowl of cereal who lives in Breakfast Town and his best friend is a pancake. and all the adventures they get in together. And then my other son, speaking of goats, just won a ribbon at the New Jersey State Goat Extravaganza for submitting a drawing that he did of a goat. And so it was just kind of cool to see them create, and that's really inspiring.
That's when we need to be in New Jersey.
The goat extravaganza? There were no goats at the goat extravaganza. You can come for the 4-H fairs or something like that. It was more about, quizzing people about goats.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I just don't know the goat world of New Jersey.
Well, by the time you get here, you can maybe play with them as well.
That's true, because you'll have them.
How do you see creativity and your spirituality connect?
So I've been thinking a lot about creativity, and I've come a long way in it. I don't know if you remember this, Ruth. When we were in Belize, I think you just launched the podcast. And I said, oh, this is great. I'm looking forward to listening to it. And you said, do you consider yourself creative? And I said, no, I do not. And then when you asked me to be on it, I was like, I got to take a pause on this. But listening to you all over the past year has really helped me to understand, okay, what does creativity look like and how am I creative? I am not artistic. I cannot craft. I am not musical. I buy my kids costumes for Halloween, and I can only play a few bars of Piano Man on the keyboard, and that's about it. It occurred to me, creativity is not just being artistic. It is, and the term I came up for it was being inspired to do something new. And that can be, of course, something obvious like writing, but it can also be, what am I putting on my CPE syllabus for my students? Or when I'm in a spiritual direction session, what am I saying in that moment? What resource am I sharing? It could even be I added cinnamon to my coffee. Never done that before, but I was like, oh, this might taste good. Or going home a different route if I'm driving, just to have a different view. So that helped me to feel like, oh, I actually am creative. And I do think everyone is creative. And the term for God that I love, and actually quoted in my CPE dissertation, was from, I don't know if you know theologian Pamela Cooper White. She refers to God as creative profusion. Oh my goodness.
I have to write that
That
down.
is just such a great term.
Yeah.
And if God is creative profusion and we are made in the image of God, or at least that's what I believe, then how are we not creative? You all have helped me to get over my creativity imposter syndrome that I had for the longest time. Somehow our society has labeled creativity as
Make a new physical object in the world.
Yeah.
Instead of just solving things in a way that works.
Yeah, I could go on and on about different things that, society might not label creative, but actually are in the everyday, not even just the big things.
That reminds me of, in February, we're having a creativity challenge for our listeners to join in on.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, I hope you join. But we had made a list of ideas, and it's very expansive because there's so many things that are creative and people don't have to be constrained by the list, but it was just to kind of show there's all sorts of things.
Oh, that's cool. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to add it to my Substack because I started writing a post in preparation for you all about creativity to
good.
kind of figure out
Hey.
what do I think. I think it's Joan Didion that says, in order to know what I think, I have to write it.
Yes.
So I've been working on something on and off about creativity.
Oh, good. Yeah. And we're
Everyone
going to be, everyone join. And Dawn and I are going to be going live each day to share what we did that day. So it's going to be
Oh, that'll
fun.
be inspiring for so many people.
I'm
It's going to
excited.
not be crafting. Just so
Excellent. I'm
Yeah.
there. So long
Although-
as I don't have to glue anything together.
Right.
Or paint anything. And listen, some people are fantastic at that. When I was in spiritual direction training, they had workshops on doing that. I know it's not for me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I may
Yeah.
do a preschool craft and call it, just include it.
So how much of creativity do you think is inspiration and how much is discipline?
Yeah, at least for me, it starts with the discipline because it's about making it a practice to do it every day. So there are writers who recommend writing every day or touching a writing project in some way, whether it's thinking about it or actually putting words on the page. And I have found that to be true. If I'm not writing regularly, it makes it harder when I do sit down and write. And I've learned I cannot wait until inspiration hits. Otherwise, there will be no words.
Right.
But if I sit down and some days have that experience where it is kind of the tooth pulling, trying to make the words come, that leads to more days where it does feel like the flow. Or if I'm even spending a few minutes writing or thinking about my writing, I'm more aware of it the rest of the day. And that's when the inspiration can come in. The other day I was sitting with a student in individual supervision in CPE, and they were saying something profound. And I also thought, oh, I could link this to that type of post, based on what I was hearing from them. And so it's that type of thing, being able to notice more. I think it's true with spirituality too, right? So the days in which I meditate first thing in the morning, I am more grounded throughout the day. The days in which I write first thing in the morning, I am thinking about writing and feeling more inspired throughout the day.
You're telling your frontal lobe what is important. And then it is letting that through while it hopefully makes nothing else come through because there's way too many stimuli in the world.
See, I knew there was a scientific reason behind it.
I mean, it's a reason to do a devotion in the morning, to be noticing God. Like people figured this out without studying brain. But that's what you're doing.
I find the same is true about gratitude, right? Like
Whatever you want to notice.
if we're trying to think about things that we're grateful for, it's also like the red car phenomenon, right? Like when, I don't know who talks about that, but once you buy a red car, you see it everywhere.
Yeah, it's the Baader-Meinhof effect.
Yeah.
Yes, we love Baader-Meinhof. I mean, I know nothing about those actual people, but it is so true.
Yes.
You notice whatever's important to you, and you have to keep telling your brain what to notice.
So true. So, Christina, I just think you're so wonderful. And I love all the
Thank you,
things
likewise.
that you're doing. And I'm wondering if, as you're thinking about the things you're currently working on or something that you're hoping to work on, is there something that Dawn could coach you on today?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say, your coaching, Dawn, has been, I feel like I had been coached by you in listening to other people's coaching sessions. Because it's
That's a
okay,
hope.
what can I do in 30 days? Or, when can I take this next step? And so you
Mhm.
have been in my mind for a while.
I'm so
and
glad. Thank you for saying that. We want to help, obviously, the person in front of us, but the point of putting it on a podcast is to help a lot of people. So thank you. I'm
No,
glad.
yeah, it has been great. And so my current issue has been my ongoing issue for quite some time. So I started even, writing more regularly on Substack, as I mentioned, because I was, I have all these like half abandoned manuscripts. But what I would love to do and what I feel called to do is to write a book. I have all the books about writing books, listened to all the speakers about, how to do it. And yet I feel stuck. Been trying to put together a book proposal. And I think my issue is feeling like I have to narrow it down, because what I love about Substack is one day I'll write about self-care. One day I write about embodiment, or I'll write about grief. And I'm like, I don't want to write a whole book about grief. I don't want to write a whole book about
The dark night of the
spiritual
soul.
practices. Yeah, I mean, that book should exist, but I don't want to write that. And so how do I kind of weave all of these in to kind of one manuscript? And maybe I have to let it go. Maybe it's not something I need to do, but it is something that has been sitting with me for a while.
What is the through line? I mean, you're not writing about car repair. There is a through line.
That is true. I do not know anything about car repair.
Yeah.
I think for me, the through line is about how we access our sense of the sacred or our spirituality in all of those moments.
Accessing sacred spirituality in everyday moments. Why do we need that right now, 2025?
Oh my goodness. Why don't we?
I think we
we're-
do, but we're going to need to tell a publisher.
So part of why I think we need it is part of why I think chaplaincy is really needed as well, because the growing population is not attending church or not going to synagogue. And so there's so many people out there who are ripe for meaning making or spiritual practices, but they don't know what to do or how to tap into that. So that's some of, actually, when I think about my readers, that's often who I'm thinking about. Like, okay, for people that would never darken the door of a church, how do I kind of introduce some of this to them?
I think that's compelling. I am not a publisher. But if you start from you are interacting with people who may or may not have a spiritual background, who suddenly are like, wow, this got real. I'm dying tomorrow. And now you walk in the door, or the people you supervise, and those are the stories, people would buy that. That's sellable. It doesn't have to be on one topic. It actually is better if it's on a variety.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what I wrestle. Again, I don't want to write a whole book about just chaplain stories,
I think
although I
selling
could.
you.
But
I don't know.
I mean, that I don't want to do. I don't want to sell me.
Well,
but
every single person is selling themselves. So, I mean, we can use a different word, but you're listening to the podcast because Ruth is so interesting, not because you're so into our topic.
and you.
Thank you. So I don't know of a major publication in the pop culture where it is from somebody who is interacting spiritually with such a wide variety of people at such a level of crisis. It's not in the New York Times bestseller 100. Maybe it is in a niche because you are in that industry and you know more of the writers. But that voice is not there.
Okay. That is helpful to hear. Yeah.
And knowing why people need it. You are giving tools that you got from high-level trauma to give to people in everyday moments. But you have
Yeah, that
street
makes
cred
sense.
because there's been, I don't know, I mean, you probably touched 10,000 lives if you're supervising all these students and they're hearing their stories. And I made up a number, but it's got to be impressive.
No, it is. It is quite high, I'm sure, having been doing this.
I think you got to lead with who you are and that you put in this time to become an expert on that crossroads moment. And it's different than nurses publish things, you know, last 5 wishes of the dying, but it's different than having the spiritual conversation.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, and that's what I've tried to do with the Substack is it's not just the patient story, but it's also how do you apply this, you know, to your life. And so I guess that's also the through line that I can share these intense crisis moments, but it's also like learning the lessons from them so that you don't have to go through those exact moments, or maybe you are in it and that's what brings you into it. So, okay, that's helpful to think like, what is the through line? Yeah, so that's helpful.
Are
to
we
think about.
close? Like I just met you. Are we close with saying the container is, I've had connections to 10,000 people in high-level trauma and I can apply it to your daily life?
I think so. I think that, yeah, I think that's essentially what it is. I think it's me figuring out like, okay, what does that look like and how do I package it and propose it?
And back to Seth Godin. I mean, he is just test marketing all his ideas on a daily basis. And whichever posts are getting the most traffic are what end up in books. So you already have a test market of your 1,000 people.
Right. And that's what's been great about Substack because it has helped buoy me to be like, okay, people want to hear this.
Yeah.
So now it's about how do I shrink it down to the core of what I'm trying to say? Because I'm like, well, some of this is because I'm a chaplain, some of this because I'm a CP supervisor, some of this because I'm a spiritual director. You know, like that's the part where it feels broad.
But it's all, you are engaging
me.
in spiritual conversations outside church in a way hardly anyone is.
Right. Yeah. And it's making that accessible to others.
Yep. You're allowed to put in other stories once you're doing it.
And you do such a good job of writing and condensing not only what you're sharing, but then, like you said, to help people apply it to their own lives. And I would buy a book with your stories, and not just because I'm a fan already. So,
oh, well, thank you. I try to make it accessible for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my husband edits everything I write, and he often says, you know, you could put Jesus in here. You don't have anything about Jesus. I was like, those people that believe in Jesus will read into Jesus. But those people that would be, you know, off-putting for them, I don't want it in there for that reason, because I want them to get something out of it too.
Yeah, you're making the spiritual truths accessible across a wide variety of beliefs, which you have to do in a hospital, which most people don't even realize you're there.
That's true. Yeah. So I can sell chaplaincy. Now I got to work on selling myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Selling your experience. All that.
And the expertise. Yeah.
And there's maybe 3 other people who have your unique overlap. A spiritual director and beekeeper and, you know, all these things, but none of them write like you. So it's you. It has to be you.
Well, thank you. That is very empowering to hear.
Good.
Are you going to give her homework?
Can you make 10 chapter titles in 2 weeks?
I can try.
What's a better number? I just said 10.
No,
Can you
no,
make 3?
no. I think so. I think I can. I think I can make 10. And then I think for me, I have to remember it's not set in stone. It's just putting 10 down and seeing, you know, what happens. Yeah.
Right. It's first draft.
Yeah. Oh, I love. Do you know what Anne Lamott says about first draft?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, you probably can't curse on here, but
No, if
SFD.
you'd like to say it.
SFD.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. 10 chapters. I can do
10
that.
chapter titles. Report back to Ruth.
Yep.
Okay.
Send them to me.
We
and
love when
then-
people are successful, and when they're not, we still love them.
There, grace abounds.
Grace abounds.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yay, I'm excited
Well,
for this
thank
book
you.
in 2026. The year that we'll be in Amsterdam together, and we'll have your book there.
Okay.
for
Oh, perfect.
people.
All right. If you spoke that into the world, maybe it'll happen. That'll be my goal.
Or you'll just
Yeah.
show up with 10 chapter titles because we'll know you'll have that. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Christine, for taking
Thank
time
you, guys.
to be
This was
with
so
us
much fun.
today. And I have to say, like, when I think of you writing a book, that just seems like the most natural thing to me. Like, I just know what's going to happen. I know it's going to be out there, and I know it's going to be a blessing to the world. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, if I can write those 10 chapter titles, that'll help. That's a step in the direction.
The rest of it writes itself.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, because that part won't be hard, right? It's just the coming up with it. But I don't mind the work of it, even though at some point it will be exhausting, I'm sure. But it's more like feeling like, how do I crack this or unlock it?
Yeah.
So,
The chapter titles will feed into the proposal too, so the work is not wasted.
right. And
You'll
help
need that.
do it in
yeah.
a different way and get my mind open to it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Created Creative.
We're so glad that you were with us to share in creative ideas with us.
And throughout the month of February, we want to include you in the creativity.
We are having a 28-day creativity challenge, encouraging everyone to explore a new creative activity each day. No repeats, 28 different things. And then the things that you try, take a picture and post it on social media with the hashtag CreatedCreativeChallenge.
So go to createdcreativepodcast.com to sign up for the challenge and to get a list of 100 ideas to do during your 28-day challenge.
And Don and I will be going live each day to share our own creative quests.
Now, but especially during February, go create something.
Go create something.